Pull that stunt again, and I'll end you, Simone hissed, pressing the jagged edge of a shattered baccarat crystal flute directly against the pulse point of the city's most feared crime lord. Gabriel Mercer didn't flinch. Instead, the corners of his mouth twitched into a dangerous, dark smile. What happens when a broke, exhausted waitress pushes back against a ruthless Korean mob boss who is used to taking exactly what he wants? You're about to dive into a true-to-life story of dangerous obsession, underworld betrayals, and a high-stakes game of cat and mouse that will leave you absolutely breathless. If you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. Buckle up. The air inside the Obsidian Lounge was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, spilled Macallan 25, and unspoken threats. It was the kind of establishment where the city's elite came to hide their sins, and where a 24-year-old black woman named Simone Jefferson spent 60 hours a week serving them. Simone's feet ached inside her cheap black pumps. Her brother, Finn, owed a crippling $50,000 to a local loan shark, and every tip she made went directly into an envelope hidden beneath her mattress. She didn't have time for drama, and she certainly didn't have time for fear. But fear was exactly what walked through the brass-handled double doors precisely at midnight. Gabriel Mercer. To the public, he was a venture capitalist. To the whispers in the alleyways, he was the undisputed head of the most ruthless Korean syndicate, operating on the East Coast. He had adopted a Western name to seamlessly blend into the corporate world, but his methods were notoriously brutal. Gabriel moved with the silent, predatory grace of a panther. His tailored charcoal Tom Ford suit clung to his broad shoulders. His midnight black hair swept back immaculately, and his dark eyes held the cold, detached emptiness of a man who decided who lived and who died before his morning coffee. He was flanked by 3 imposing men, but Gabriel commanded the room without saying a word. The ambient noise in the lounge dropped by half. Even the jazz pianist seemed to hit the keys a little softer. Simone was assigned to VIP Table 4, Gabriel's table. "Just keep your head down, Simone," her manager, an anxious man named Oliver, whispered as he practically shoved a silver tray into her hands. "Don't look him in the eye. Pour the drinks. Back away." Simone clenched her jaw, balancing the heavy tray, loaded with a fresh bottle of scotch, and 3 crystal tumblers. She approached the velvet-roped section. Gabriel was seated in the center of the semicircular leather booth, lazily swirling a half-empty glass of water. His right-hand man, a heavily tattooed enforcer named Jasper, was arguing quietly with another associate. As Simone leaned in to set the fresh glasses on the table, Jasper threw his arm back to emphasize a point, his heavy gold watch slamming hard into Simone's wrist. The pain was sharp and sudden. The silver tray tipped. Time seemed to slow down as the bottle of scotch tipped over, cascading a stream of amber liquid directly into Gabriel Mercer's lap, soaking the pristine fabric of his trousers and pooling on the leather seat. A collective gasp echoed from the surrounding tables. Jasper leapt up, his hand instantly flying to the holster concealed beneath his jacket. "You stupid bitch," Jasper snarled, stepping into Simone's personal space, his imposing frame meant to terrify her into a puddle of tears. "Do you know what you just did?" Simone's heart hammered against her ribs, but a lifetime of fighting for survival in the worst neighborhoods of the city ignited a hot, blinding spark of rage in her chest. She was tired. She was broke. And she was absolutely done being bullied by men in expensive suits. Jasper reached out, his thick fingers grabbing Simone roughly by the collar of her uniform blouse, yanking her forward. "Get on your knees and clean it up," he spat. Gabriel remained seated. He didn't move to stop his enforcer. He simply watched Simone, his dark eyes analyzing her reaction, expecting the usual terrified begging. Instead, Simone's hand shot out. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, she grabbed one of the baccarat crystal flutes off the neighboring table and smashed it against the solid oak edge of the booth. The base shattered, leaving her holding a viciously sharp, jagged weapon. Before Jasper could register the movement, Simone drove her heel into his instep, forcing him to drop her collar With a grunt of pain, she lunged forward, bypassing the enforcer entirely, and closed the distance to Gabriel Mercer. She slammed her hand onto the back of Gabriel's leather boot, trapping him, and brought the jagged edge of the broken glass directly to his throat. The sharp point pressed just enough to indent the skin over his carotid artery. "Pull that stunt again, and I'll end you," Simone hissed, her dark eyes locking onto Gabriel's. Her chest heaved, her voice low, deadly, and completely devoid of fear. "Tell your lapdog to back the hell up before I ruin your custom suit with your own blood. I am a waitress, not your maid, and definitely not your punching bag." The entire lounge froze. The pianist stopped playing entirely. Half a dozen weapons were drawn and pointed directly at Simone's head by Gabriel's men. But Gabriel didn't raise his hands. He didn't order his men to fire. He looked up at the stunning, furious black woman, holding a makeshift knife to his throat. He took in the fire in her eyes, the steady grip of her hand, and the absolute certainty in her voice. A slow, chilling smile spread across his lips. "Stand down, Jasper," Gabriel ordered, his voice smooth and calm, sending a shiver down Simone's spine. "But boss," I said. "Stand down." Gabriel's tone left no room for argument. The guns were slowly lowered. Gabriel shifted slightly, the broken glass grazing his skin, leaving a microscopic bead of red. He didn't seem to care. He looked at Simone with a newfound intense fascination. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Simone," she snapped, not moving the glass an inch. "Well, Simone," Gabriel murmured, leaning in just a fraction of an inch closer to the sharp edge, "you owe me a new suit, and a very expensive bottle of scotch. I suggest you put the glass down before my men decide they don't care about my orders." Simone stared at him for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, realizing she was standing in a room full of armed killers, she slowly lowered her hand, tossing the broken glass onto the table. It clattered loudly in the silent room. Without breaking eye contact, she turned on her heel and walked toward the staff exit, waiting for the bullet to hit her back. It never came. Simone didn't sleep that night. She locked the 3 deadbolts on her cramped Bronx apartment door, dragged a wooden dresser in front of it, and sat on her worn-out sofa with a rusted tire iron in her lap. She expected the door to be kicked off its hinges at any moment. You don't hold a weapon to Gabriel Mercer's throat and live to see the sunrise. But the sunrise came. Pale morning light filtered through the smog-stained windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. At 8:00 a.m., there was a sharp, authoritative knock at her door. Simone tightened her grip on the tire iron, her palms sweating. She crept to the peephole. Standing in the hallway was Jasper. He was alone, wearing a dark suit, looking completely out of place in her run-down apartment building. "Open the door, Simone." Jasper's muffled voice carried through the cheap wood. "If we wanted you dead, you wouldn't have woken up. The boss wants to see you." Knowing she couldn't run forever, Simone pulled the dresser away, unlocked the deadbolts, and opened the door. She stood tall, refusing to let him see the terror clawing at her insides. "Get dressed," Jasper said, gruffly, though there was a grudging sliver of respect in his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. Cars waiting downstairs. 20 minutes later, Simone was sitting in the back of a blacked-out Cadillac Escalade, speeding toward the financial district. She was wearing her best pair of jeans and a clean white sweater, feeling woefully underdressed as the vehicle pulled into the private underground parking garage of a towering glass skyscraper. Jasper led her up a private elevator that bypassed the main lobby and opened directly into a sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse office. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic, dizzying view of the city. Gabriel Mercer was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the skyline. He had changed into a tailored navy suit that looked even more expensive than the one she had ruined. "Sit," he commanded gently, turning to face her. Simone remained standing. "I'd rather stand. If you're going to kill me, just get it over with." Gabriel chuckled. A rich, dark sound that vibrated through the massive room. He walked over to his mahogany desk and picked up a manila folder. "If I wanted you dead, Simone, my men would be cleaning up your apartment right now," Gabriel said, leaning against the edge of his desk. He flipped the folder open. Simone Jefferson, 24, no criminal record, working 2 jobs, and currently struggling to pay off a $50,000 debt accrued by your older brother Finn to a man named Anthony. A man who, coincidentally, is a very annoying thorn in my side. Simone's blood ran cold. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything that happens in this city," Gabriel said smoothly. He closed the folder and looked at her, his intense gaze stripping away her defenses. "You showed remarkable composure last night. Most hardened criminals would have wet themselves if Jasper grabbed them like that. But you calculated the threat, neutralized the immediate aggressor, and targeted the man in charge. You are completely fearless." "I was terrified," Simone corrected him, lifting her chin. "But I'm more terrified of dying broke and helpless." "I can respect that," Gabriel murmured. He pushed off the desk and slowly closed the distance between them. Simone forced herself not to step back. He stopped just inches away, looking down at her. Up close, the sheer magnetism of the man was overwhelming. "I have a proposition for you, Simone. One that will erase your brother's debt by noon today." Simone narrowed her eyes. "I don't do sex work." Gabriel's eyes flashed with dark amusement. "If I wanted to hire a professional, I have a contact list full of them. No, I need something entirely different. I need a distraction." He turned and paced back toward the window. "My syndicate operations are expanding. To solidify a merger with a rival faction, the elders in my organization are attempting to force me into an arranged marriage with the daughter of a prominent boss. It is a strategic nightmare that I have no intention of fulfilling. If I reject her outright, it starts a war. If I am already deeply, publicly involved with someone else, someone completely outside our world, it buys me the time I need to dismantle their leverage." Simone stared at him, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. "You want me to be your fake girlfriend?" "I want you to be my partner in a very dangerous piece of theater," Gabriel corrected. "You will accompany me to dinners, galas, and private meetings. You will live here, in this penthouse. You will wear the clothes I provide, and you will convince everyone in my circle that I am so utterly obsessed with you that I would burn the city down before marrying anyone else. And if I say no, then Jasper drives you back to your apartment, and you can continue scraping pennies together until Anthony decides to break your brother's legs," Gabriel said, his tone utterly devoid of sympathy. "It's your choice." Simone looked around the luxurious office. She thought of Finn, bruised and battered, hiding in alleys. She thought of the endless, bone-crushing double shifts at the lounge. She looked back at Gabriel. The Korean Mafia boss was handing her a ticket out of hell, but it required her to step directly into the fire. 50,000 pays off the debt, Simone negotiated, her voice steady. "But if I'm risking my life playing house with a mob boss, I want 100,000 deposited into a secure offshore account, and I want it in writing that I walk away clean when this is over." Gabriel's smile returned, sharper and more genuine this time. "Deal. Welcome to the family, Simone." The transformation happened rapidly. Within 48 hours, Simone's life in the Bronx felt like a distant, hazy nightmare. She was relocated to Gabriel's penthouse, assigned a personal security detail, and introduced to a wardrobe that cost more than her entire neighborhood's annual income. But the clothes and the luxury were just armor. Simone knew she was walking onto a battlefield. Her first real test came on a Thursday night. Gabriel was hosting an intimate, high-stakes poker game in the private subterranean levels of the Waldorf Astoria. The guest list consisted of politicians, corrupt judges, and the heads of 3 rival syndicates, including the men trying to force Gabriel into marriage. Simone stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her suite, adjusting the straps of a breathtaking, emerald green silk gown that clung to her curves like liquid glass. A diamond collar rested coolly against her collarbone. She looked like royalty, but inside, her stomach was tied in agonizing knots. "You look stunning," a voice said from the doorway. Simone turned to see Gabriel leaning against the doorframe. He was in a pristine black tuxedo, his dark hair styled perfectly. The way his eyes swept over her wasn't entirely professional. And for a fleeting second, Simone felt a genuine rush of heat pool in her belly. "Don't sound so surprised," Simone retorted, grabbing her clutch. "I clean up well. Just remember the rules," Gabriel said, his tone shifting back to business as he offered her his arm. "Smile. Speak only when spoken to. Let them see that you are mine." "I belong to no one, Gabriel," Simone said, looping her arm through his but keeping her gaze sharp. "We're business partners. Tonight. You belong to me," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her ear, sending a completely involuntary shiver down her spine. "Play the part, Simone." The underground room at the Waldorf was suffocatingly opulent. The moment Gabriel and Simone walked in, the heavy mahogany doors shutting behind them, the conversation died. Every eye in the room turned to them. Simone felt the weight of a dozen predatory stares, evaluating her, dissecting her, trying to figure out why the untouchable Gabriel Mercer had brought a complete stranger into their inner sanctum. Gabriel guided her to the main table, his hand resting possessively on the small of her bare back. The touch was a brand, a clear message to everyone in the room. Seated at the table was a man in his late 50s, with cold, reptilian eyes. This was the man pushing the arranged marriage. Beside him sat Anthony, the loan shark who held her brother's debt. Simone's breath hitched, but she forced her face into an impassive mask. She felt Gabriel's hand tighten slightly on her waist in silent support. He knew Anthony was here. He had planned this. "Gabriel," the older man purred, gesturing to the empty seat. "And who is this lovely creature? I don't believe we've been introduced." "This is Simone," Gabriel said, pulling out a chair for her before taking his own. "She's the reason I'll be declining your very generous offer of a union with your daughter." A tense silence fell over the table. Anthony leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, as he recognized Simone from the streets. "Simone?" Anthony sneered, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Funny. She looks exactly like the little waitress who's been begging me for extra time on a 50 grand marker. Small world." The implication was clear. Anthony was trying to humiliate Gabriel by exposing Simone's background, proving she was nothing but a cheap pawn. Gabriel's expression remained stone cold, but Simone felt the sudden, dangerous shift in his energy. He was preparing to escalate. Before Gabriel could speak, Simone let out a soft, dismissive laugh. It was musical, elegant, and dripping with condescension. She reached forward and picked up a heavy, gold-plated Zippo lighter from the table, turning it over in her manicured hands. "It is a small world, Anthony," Simone said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the felt-top table. "Though I'm surprised you have time to play cards tonight. I heard your southern shipping route got intercepted by the feds yesterday morning. A loss of what? 5 million? The color drained instantly from Anthony's face. The entire table stiffened. That information was highly classified, known only to a few top bosses. Gabriel had casually mentioned it to Simone earlier that day while reading his emails, and she had filed it away in her photographic memory. "How do you?" Anthony stammered, looking frantically at the other bosses who were now glaring at him suspiciously. A compromised boss was a dead boss. Simone smiled sweetly, leaning back in her chair and crossing her legs. "Gabriel tells me everything. We don't keep secrets. Now, are we playing cards, or are we going to sit here discussing your failed investments?" Gabriel looked at Simone, genuine shock and intense pride warring in his dark eyes. She hadn't just defended herself. She had completely neutralized a rival's attack and elevated Gabriel's status by proving how tightly knit their partnership was. As the dealer began to shuffle the cards, Gabriel leaned over, his lips brushing against Simone's ear. "Remind me never to play poker against you," he murmured. "Just don't cross me, Mercer," she whispered back, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The game went on for hours, but the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Simone wasn't just a prop anymore. She was a player, and as Gabriel drove them back to the penthouse late that night, the silence in the car was thick, heavy with adrenaline, and an undeniable, magnetic tension that was no longer just an act. Simone realized with terrifying clarity that the real danger wasn't the rival mafias or the hitmen. The real danger was that she was starting to fall for the devil himself. The morning after the underground poker game, the atmosphere in the penthouse felt distinctly altered. The invisible line separating the employer from the employee had blurred, leaving a charged, crackling energy in its wake. Simone awoke in her sprawling guest suite, the sheets of Egyptian cotton feeling heavy against her skin. She stared at the vaulted ceiling, her mind racing. She had survived her first foray into Gabriel Mercer's world, but she had also painted a massive target on her own back. She found Gabriel in the penthouse gym, a sprawling glass-enclosed space overlooking the Hudson River. He was viciously attacking a heavy leather punching bag. He wore only grey sweatpants, his bare torso slick with sweat, muscles flexing and bunching with every devastating strike. The sheer physical power of the man was hypnotic. He wasn't just a boss who hid behind men with guns. He was a lethal weapon himself. "You're up early," Gabriel noted, not pausing his rhythm. Thwack, thwack, boom. A brutal 1-2 combination followed by a devastating roundhouse kick. "Sleeping in a mafia boss's lair doesn't exactly cure insomnia," Simone replied, crossing her arms as she leaned against the glass doorway. She wore one of the silk robes his staff had provided, the deep burgundy color contrasting sharply with her dark skin. Gabriel finally stopped, catching the swinging bag and turning to face her. He grabbed a towel, wiping his face, his dark eyes trailing over her with an unreadable expression. "You handled yourself flawlessly last night." Sebastian, the man trying to force the marriage, was furious. Anthony was practically sweating blood. "You bought us the time we needed. And what happens now?" Simone asked, stepping into the gym. "They aren't just going to back down because you brought a pretty girl to a poker game. Anthony knows who I am. He knows about Finn." At the mention of her brother, Gabriel's expression hardened. He tossed the towel onto a bench and walked toward a built-in refrigerator, tossing her a bottle of water before opening one for himself. "Anthony's debt has been wiped clean, as agreed," Gabriel said, taking a long drink. "But you're right. Your brother is a liability, which is why I had Jasper pick him up this morning." Simone dropped the water bottle. It hit the rubberized floor with a dull thud. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her chest. "You did what? Where is he?" "Gabriel. If you hurt him..." "Relax," Gabriel interrupted, stepping into her space and gripping her shoulders. His touch was firm, but remarkably gentle, grounding her spiraling panic. "I didn't hurt him. I put him in a secure, private rehabilitation facility in upstate New York, paid for the next 6 months in full. He needs to get clean, Simone. And more importantly, he needs to be completely off the board. If Sebastian or Anthony realize how much you mean to me, they will use Finn to get to you, and through you, to me." Simone stared up into his dark eyes, her breath hitching. "How much you mean to me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and dangerous. It was supposed to be an act, a business arrangement. But the intensity in Gabriel's gaze wasn't manufactured. "He's my only family," she whispered, the tough, street-smart exterior fracturing. "Just a fraction. He's an idiot. But he's all I have left. You have me now," Gabriel stated, the possessiveness in his voice absolute. He lifted a hand, his thumb gently brushing a stray curl away from her cheek. The contrast of his calloused, fighter's hands against her soft skin sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. As long as you are under my roof, you are untouchable. Do you understand? Simone couldn't speak. She merely nodded, completely captivated by the raw, magnetic pull of the man standing before her. Gabriel's gaze dropped to her lips for an agonizingly long second. The air grew impossibly thick. Simone leaned in, her heart hammering against her ribs, anticipating the collision of their mouths. Suddenly, the intercom on the gym wall buzzed sharply. Gabriel tore his eyes away, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He stepped back, the invisible tether between them snapping. He walked over and hit the button. "What? Boss?" Jasper's gruff voice crackled through the speaker. "We have a problem at the docks. Sebastian's crew just intercepted one of our shipments, and they left a message." Gabriel's demeanor transformed instantly. The lingering heat of their moment vanished, replaced by the chilling, calculating aura of the syndicate head. "What kind of message?" "They left 2 of our men in the shipping container." Jasper paused, in pieces. "They're demanding a sit-down tonight. At the MoMA charity gala. Public venue. Lots of witnesses. Prepare the cars," Gabriel ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. He turned back to Simone, his eyes completely dark. "Get dressed. We're going to a party." The Museum of Modern Art was transformed into a dazzling display of wealth and philanthropy. The gala, a high-profile charity event raising millions for pediatric research, was overflowing with the city's political elite, A-list celebrities, and, lurking beneath the glamorous veneer, the most dangerous criminals on the eastern seaboard. Simone walked through the grand entrance, her hand resting lightly on Gabriel's arm. She wore a backless, midnight blue velvet gown that swept the marble floor, her hair pulled into an elegant, intricate updo. She looked every inch the billionaire's consort, but beneath the flowing fabric strapped to her upper thigh was a sleek, compact Sig Sauer P. 365. Gabriel had insisted she carry it, having Jasper give her a crash course in the penthouse firing range earlier that afternoon. "Keep your eyes moving," Gabriel murmured, offering a charming, perfectly faked smile to a passing city councilwoman. "Sebastian will try to isolate us. Do not leave my side for any reason. I thought the point of a public venue was that no one pulls a trigger," Simone whispered back, lifting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter to give her trembling hands something to hold. "With men like Sebastian, the public is the point," Gabriel replied, guiding her toward the contemporary art wing. "If he takes me down in front of the mayor and the police commissioner, it proves he's untouchable. It solidifies his power." They navigated the crowded room, the clinking of crystal and the soft murmur of string quartets, creating a surreal soundtrack to the impending violence. Finally, they reached a roped-off VIP section near a massive, abstract canvas. Sebastian was waiting. The older boss was sipping a martini, surrounded by 4 massive enforcers whose tailored suits couldn't hide the bulk of their tactical gear. "Gabriel." Sebastian smiled, spreading his arms. "So glad you could make it to this celebration of culture. And the lovely Simone is with you again. I must admit, I underestimated your attachment to this commoner." Gabriel stepped in front of Simone, a subtle protective maneuver. "Let's skip the theatricals, Sebastian. You butchered 2 of my men and cost me a shipment. You wanted my attention. You have it." Sebastian sighed, swirling his drink. "I offered you an alliance. A marriage to my daughter would have united our families, creating an empire that controlled everything from Boston to Miami. But you insulted me. You flaunted this street trash in my face to prove a point." Simone felt her blood boil, but she remembered Gabriel's instructions. She remained silent, her eyes scanning the room, analyzing the exits. "I don't merge my business, and I don't let fossils dictate my personal life," Gabriel said, his voice lethal and quiet. "You crossed a line today, Sebastian. One you can't uncross." "Oh, Gabriel, you're too arrogant for your own good," Sebastian chuckled softly. You think you walked into a negotiation? You walked into an execution. Before Gabriel could react, the lights in the contemporary wing plunged into pitch blackness. Screams erupted from the main hall as the sudden darkness triggered mass panic. The sound of breaking glass shattered the air. Get down, Gabriel roared, grabbing Simone by the waist and tackling her behind a heavy marble sculpture, just as the deafening crack, crack, crack of suppressed automatic weapons shredded the space where they had been standing a second prior. The velvet rope was torn to shreds by gunfire. The abstract painting behind them was decimated. They brought night vision. Gabriel cursed in the dark, pulling a heavy Glock from his shoulder holster. We need to move, now. I can't see anything, Simone whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Hold on to my jacket. Do not let go. Gabriel moved with terrifying precision. He leaned around the marble base and fired twice. A heavy thud in the dark confirmed a hit. He grabbed Simone's hand, pulling her along the polished floor. They scrambled behind a thick concrete pillar. Boss! Jasper's voice echoed over an earpiece Gabriel wore. They jammed our comms outside. They have men covering the main exits. You're boxed in the east wing. Get the cars to the service alley. Gabriel barked back quietly. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the floor, inches from Simone's velvet-clad legs. One of Sebastian's men was advancing on their position, an assault rifle raised. Gabriel was reloading, his magazine empty. He didn't have time. Instinct took over. Simone didn't think. She reached down, yanked the Sig Sauer from her thigh holster, stepped out from behind the pillar, and aimed directly at the flashlight's blinding beam. She pulled the trigger. The recoil snapped her wrists back. The loud crack of the gunshot deafening in the enclosed gallery. The flashlight dropped, shattering on the ground, followed by the heavy thud of the enforcer collapsing. Gabriel stared at her, in the dim light filtering in from the street windows. You didn't hesitate. You said it yourself. Simone breathed, her hands shaking violently as she lowered the gun. I'm a survivor. Let's get the hell out of here. They navigated the labyrinth of the museum's back corridors, avoiding 2 more patrols, relying entirely on Gabriel's lethal efficiency and Simone's desperate courage. They burst through the heavy steel doors of the service exit, stumbling into the damp, rain-slicked alleyway, where Jasper had a bulletproof SUV waiting, the engine roaring. Gabriel shoved Simone into the back seat, diving in right behind her as gunfire rained down on the reinforced glass. Jasper slammed the accelerator, the massive vehicle tearing out of the alley and disappearing into the chaotic New York night. As the adrenaline began to fade, Simone slumped against the leather seats, gasping for air. She looked over at Gabriel. He was clutching his left side. Blood, dark and thick, was seeping through his tailored jacket, staining the white shirt beneath. Gabriel! Simone cried out, pressing her hands frantically against the wound. It's just a graze, he grunted, his face pale, leaning his head back against the seat. He looked at her, his dark eyes intensely focused despite the pain. He reached up, his bloody hand gently touching her cheek. You saved my life. Don't die on me, Mercer, she threatened, tears of terror finally spilling over. I still haven't collected my full payday. Gabriel managed a weak, dark smile before his eyes rolled back and he passed out completely. The safe house was an unmarked, brutalist concrete fortress hidden in the industrial wasteland of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was a stark contrast to the penthouse. No panoramic views, no silk sheets, just cold efficiency, heavy weaponry, and absolute secrecy. Simone sat beside a steel-framed cot in the medical bay, holding Gabriel's hand. A syndicate doctor had spent 2 hours digging a 9mm hollow point out of Gabriel's obliques. It hadn't been a graze. The bullet had lodged dangerously close to his kidney, but he was going to live. It was 4:00 a.m. Jasper stood by the heavy steel door, arms crossed, his face a mask of furious concentration. How did Sebastian know Our exact coordinates in the museum, Simone asked softly, not taking her eyes off Gabriel's pale face. How did they bypass your security? They had the lights cut. They had night vision. They knew exactly where we were standing. Jasper's jaw clenched tight. It was an inside job. Someone fed them our tactical layout. We're tearing the organization apart right now. Anyone who had access to the security detail is being interrogated. Simone felt a sickening twist in her gut. A mole. Yes, Jasper growled. And when I find them, I'm going to take my time peeling them apart. A low groan drew Simone's attention back to the bed. Gabriel's eyes fluttered open, heavy with painkillers. But almost instantly, the predatory sharpness returned to his gaze. He tried to sit up, wincing sharply. Don't move. You idiot, Simone commanded, pressing a firm hand against his uninjured shoulder to keep him down. You were shot. Act like it. Gabriel looked at her hand, then up to her face. The harsh fluorescent lights of the bunker stripped away the glamour of the evening, leaving only the raw, desperate reality of who they were. Jasper, Gabriel rasped. Here, boss, we have a leak. I know. We're running traces on all encrypted comms. Jasper hesitated, pulling a burner phone from his pocket. But boss, there's something else. We found a secondary communication line. It wasn't one of our men. Jasper looked nervously at Simone. Spit it out, Jasper, Gabriel demanded. The tactical layout, the security rotations, they were leaked from a civilian IP address. Specifically, from the private Wi-Fi network at the Silver Pines Rehabilitation Center in upstate New York. The blood drained from Simone's face completely. The room started to spin. No, that's impossible. Finn doesn't know anything about your security. He's in rehab. Gabriel's eyes hardened, calculating the variables with terrifying speed. He doesn't know the security, but he knows you. He knows how you think, how you operate. Jasper, trace the origin. Jesper tapped on a tablet. The logs show remote access to your personal cloud server, boss. The password was bypassed using a backdoor exploit. Someone used Finn's IP address to mask the hack. But Jasper swallowed hard. Before the hack, there were outgoing messages from Finn's device to an unlisted number linked to Anthony's crew. Simone stood up, backing away from the bed as if it were on fire. You're saying my brother sold us out? You're saying Finn told them where we were? Anthony held his debt, Gabriel said quietly, his voice devoid of the warmth it had held just hours ago. Anthony works closely with Sebastian. They needed an in. They used Finn's fear, or his greed, to get him to slip spyware onto your phone before you left your apartment. That spyware gave them access to my servers when you connected to the penthouse Wi-Fi. Simone put her hands over her mouth, a sob tearing from her throat. Her brother, the man she had worked 60 hours a week to save, the man she had traded her freedom and risked her life for. He had sold her out to the monsters she was trying to protect him from. He didn't know, Simone pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Gabriel, please. He's stupid. He's desperate. But he wouldn't intentionally get me killed. He gave them the keys to my kingdom. Simone, Gabriel stated, sitting up fully, despite the bleeding wound, his face a mask of absolute, unforgiving authority. Because of him, 2 of my men are dead. Because of him, I was almost assassinated. In my world, treason is paid for in blood. He's my brother, she screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. And I am the head of this syndicate. Gabriel roared back, the sheer force of his presence filling the room. He swung his legs over the edge of the cot, ignoring the fresh blood seeping through his bandages. He stood, towering over her. I offered you protection. I wiped his debt. I put him in a facility to save his miserable life. And he repaid me by handing us to Sebastian. Gabriel turned to his enforcer. Jasper, dispatch a team to Silver Pines. Bring Finn here, alive. Simone threw herself between Gabriel and the door. her eyes blazing with a mixture of terror and fierce protectiveness. "No! If you bring him here, you'll kill him. I won't let you do that." Gabriel looked down at the woman who had held a broken glass to his throat. The woman who had just shot a man to save his life. The woman he was terrifyingly close to loving. The conflict in his dark eyes was profound. A brutal war between the ruthless mob boss he had to be and the man who wanted to pull her into his arms and never let go. "Move, Simone," Gabriel said softly. A warning and a plea rolled into one. "I won't." She stood her ground, her chin raised, trembling but resolute. "You said I was a partner. You said we were in this together. If he dies, I walk. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the danger. If you kill my brother, you lose me forever." The silence in the bunker was suffocating. Jasper stood perfectly still, his hand hovering near his weapon, waiting for the order to move the girl by force. Gabriel stared at her. He saw the absolute truth in her eyes. She meant it. She would burn his empire down from the inside, or die trying if he hurt her blood. Slowly, agonizingly, Gabriel took a step back. "Cancel the order, Jasper," Gabriel commanded, not breaking eye contact with Simone. "Boss, the captains will demand a retaliation if they find out the leak came from her brother." "I said cancel the order," Gabriel snapped. He reached out and grabbed Simone by the waist, pulling her flush against his chest, uncaring about his bleeding wound. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You just cashed in the biggest favor in the history of this city," Gabriel whispered, his voice vibrating with a terrifying mix of anger and raw desire. "Your brother lives. But the fake relationship, the business arrangement, that ends right now." Before Simone could process his words, Gabriel crashed his lips down onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It was brutal, desperate, and fueled by adrenaline, blood, and the terrifying realization that they were both completely trapped by each other. Simone gasped against his mouth, her hands flying up to grip his shoulders. She should have pushed him away. She should have run. But the fire that had been simmering between them since that first night in the lounge finally exploded. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, anchoring herself to the most dangerous man in the city. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing heavily, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "We are going to war with Sebastian," Gabriel promised, his voice a lethal purr. "And when the dust settles, you are not going back to the Bronx. You are staying with me. Permanently." Simone looked into the eyes of the devil, knowing she had just sold her soul, and realizing she didn't care. "Then let's go kill Sebastian." For 3 days, the brutalist concrete bunker in the Brooklyn Navy Yard became the nerve center of a shadow war. Gabriel Mercer's recovery was a testament to sheer, stubborn willpower. By the 3rd morning, he was out of the medical bay, his torso wrapped tightly in white gauze beneath a black tactical turtleneck, reviewing encrypted Palantir data streams on a wall of illuminated monitors. Simone didn't return to the penthouse. The velvet gowns and diamond collars were packed away, replaced by functional Cry-Precision cargo pants, combat boots, and a form-fitting Arc'teryx jacket. The transformation was absolute. The waitress who used to cower from arrogant customers was dead. In her place stood a woman who had tasted blood, survived an assassination attempt, and bound herself to the most lethal man in New York. She stood beside Gabriel, studying the glowing web of Sebastian and Antony's illicit empires. "They're bleeding us on the eastern docks," Jasper reported. Stepping into the command center, he tossed a thick dossier onto the steel table. "Sebastian's men seized 3 of our shipping containers. Weapons, mostly. But Antony is the one funding the muscle. He's liquidating assets to pay for freelance hit squads." Gabriel leaned over the table, wincing slightly as his wound pulled. "If Antony is the bank, we break the bank, cut off the funding, and Sebastian's mercenaries will scatter like rats." Simone's eyes darted across the digital map of the city. Her eidetic memory, honed by years of memorizing complex drink orders and VIP seating charts, pieced together the puzzle fragments faster than the hardened criminals in the room. Anthony doesn't trust digital banking, Simone said suddenly, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. When my brother owed him money, Anthony's collectors always bragged about his physical ledgers. They called it the vault. They said he kept all his master encryption keys on cold storage drives. Gabriel looked at her, his dark eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and dangerous intent. Do you know where it is? Not exactly, Simone admitted. But I know who does. His chief accountant, a guy named Warren. Warren used to come into the Obsidian Lounge every Tuesday night at 9:00 p.m. on the dot. Always ordered a Chivas Regal neat. Always brought an escort. And he always, without fail, paid with a Black American Express card, registered to a shell company called Apex Holdings. Jasper immediately began typing on his tablet. Within seconds, a high-resolution surveillance photo of a balding, nervous-looking man appeared on the main screen. Warren Schiff, Jasper confirmed. He owns a heavily fortified penthouse at the Four Seasons residences in Tribeca. Security is state-of-the-art. Biometric scanners, reinforced steel doors, and private elevator access. Then we don't go through the door, Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. He turned to Simone. You know his habits. You know his weaknesses. How do we get inside? Simone stared at Warren's photo. A cold, calculated calm washed over her. He has a weakness for women who look exactly like me. And he has an ego that makes him sloppy. 3 hours later, the plan was in motion. Gabriel refused to let Simone go in alone. Despite his injury, they operated with ruthless precision. Simone, dressed in a stunning, provocative red silk slip dress she had salvaged from Gabriel's penthouse wardrobe, walked into the opulent lobby of the Four Seasons residences. She bypassed the front desk, her confidence radiating like a physical force, and intercepted Warren just as he stepped out of a private town car. She played the part perfectly, the stranded, beautiful woman needing a phone and a glass of water. Warren, blinded by his own arrogance and her undeniable beauty, invited her up to his impenetrable fortress. The moment the private elevator doors hissed shut, Simone's demeanor shifted. As the car climbed to the 50th floor, she pressed her thumb against the emergency stop button. Before Warren could protest, she drew the Sig Sauer P365 from her matching red clutch and pressed the cold steel directly beneath his chin. Not a sound. Warren, Simone hissed, her eyes dead and empty. Or I'll paint the mahogany panels with your brains. She reached into his jacket, extracting his master keycard and his custom Audemars Piguet watch. She bypassed the elevator's security panel, using a decryption dongle Jasper had provided, sending a signal to the roof. When the elevator finally opened into the penthouse, Gabriel and Jasper were already waiting, having descended from a stealth helicopter insertion via the rooftop terrace. They moved like phantoms. Gabriel grabbed Warren by the collar, dragging him toward his own private office. Open the safe, Warren, Gabriel commanded, pressing the barrel of a suppressed Glock 19 against the accountant's temple, and hand over the cold storage drives. All of them. Trembling, sobbing, Warren complied. The heavy steel door of the concealed safe swung open, revealing stacks of bearer bonds, raw diamonds, and, most importantly, a series of Ledger Nano X crypto wallets containing hundreds of millions of dollars in untraceable funds. Anthony's entire empire. Transfer it all. Gabriel ordered his tech specialist over the comms. Within 10 minutes, Anthony was bankrupt. The financial spine of Sebastian's machine was snapped in half. As they left the penthouse, leaving a bound and gagged Warren behind, Gabriel pulled Simone into the shadows of the service stairwell. He pressed her back against the cool concrete wall, his mouth crashing down onto hers. The kiss was fueled by adrenaline, victory, and the intoxicating reality that they were an unstoppable force. You are magnificent, Gabriel breathed against her lips, his hands gripping her waist. "We're not done yet," Simone whispered back, her heart pounding. Sebastian is going to realize he's broke by morning. He's a cornered animal now, and cornered animals go for the easiest prey. The realization hit them both simultaneously. The easiest prey wasn't Gabriel. It was the only vulnerability Simone had left in the world. The Silver Pines Rehabilitation Center sat nestled in 50 acres of dense, sprawling forest in upstate New York. It was an exclusive facility catering to the wealthy and the broken, surrounded by high wrought-iron fences and private security. Sebastian didn't care about the security. Stripped of his funding and facing a mutiny from his unpaid mercenaries, the older syndicate boss was operating purely on desperation and rage. If he could capture Finn, he could force Gabriel to surrender. A convoy of 3 unmarked black Chevrolet Suburbans tore down the winding private road toward the facility just before dawn. Heavily armed men poured out, cutting the perimeter alarms and moving with tactical precision toward the main residential wing. But Gabriel and Simone were already there. They had anticipated Sebastian's desperate move. The facility had been quietly evacuated of all civilian staff and patients hours prior, replaced by Gabriel's most elite strike team. The Korean syndicate, deeply rooted in the ruthless traditions of the Kangpai, demanded absolute loyalty, and Gabriel's men were masters of the ambush. Simone sat in the darkened security control room, watching the CCTV monitors as Sebastian's men breached the front doors. Gabriel stood beside her, an HK-416 assault rifle slung across his chest. "They're taking the bait," Jasper's voice crackled over the radio from his sniper position on the roof. 20 hostiles entering the main atrium. "Let them get deep inside," Gabriel ordered coldly. "Trap them." While the trap was springing, Simone had one final, agonizing task to complete. She left the control room, flanked by 2 of Gabriel's guards, and walked down the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway to a secure isolation room. Inside sat her brother, Finn. He looked healthy, clean, and utterly terrified. Simone unlocked the heavy door and stepped inside. Finn leaped up from his cot, his eyes wide with panic. "Simone, thank God," Finn gasped, rushing toward her. "There are men outside with guns. You have to get me out of here. Gabriel Mercer's people grabbed me. They—" "Stop!" Simone commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. The sheer authority in her tone stopped Finn dead in his tracks. He stared at his sister, realizing she was no longer the exhausted, accommodating waitress who bailed him out of trouble. She was hardened, armed, and vibrating with barely contained fury. "I know what you did, Finn," Simone said softly, the betrayal tasting like ash in her mouth. "I know you planted the spyware on my phone. I know you sold our location to Anthony and Sebastian." Finn's face drained of color. He took a stumbling step backward. "Simone, you don't understand. Anthony came to me," he said. "He said, if I just gave him access, he'd wipe my debt. He promised me $500,000 to start a new life in Paris. He said they wouldn't hurt you. He just wanted Gabriel. You handed them the keys to slaughter us in a museum." Simone yelled, the pain finally breaking through her stoic facade. "2 men died. Finn! Gabriel was shot. Because of you. You abandoned me," Finn screamed back, his own selfish resentment bubbling to the surface. "You went off to live in a billion-dollar penthouse with a mob boss, wearing diamonds, while I was stuck in this prison. You always thought you were better than me. You always judged me." Simone stared at the man she shared blood with. She saw the weakness in his eyes, the absolute lack of accountability. He hadn't just made a mistake out of fear. He had sold her out of jealousy and greed. The brother she had sacrificed her youth to protect had never really existed. A heavy, profound silence fell between them. The sound of distant, suppressed gunfire echoed from the atrium as Gabriel's men engaged Sebastian's kill squad. The war had reached their doorstep. "I didn't abandon you, Finn," Simone said, her voice dropping to a dead, emotionless calm. "I broke my back to keep you breathing, but I can't save someone who wants to drown." She turned toward the door. Simone, please. Finn lunged forward, grabbing her arm. You can't leave me here. They'll kill me. Simone looked down at his hand, then up into his desperate eyes. She didn't feel pity anymore. She just felt exhausted. She firmly detached his fingers from her jacket. Gabriel's men will escort you to an airstrip, Simone told him coldly. There is a charter plane waiting. It will take you to London. There is a bank account set up in your name with $50,000. That is the last piece of my life you will ever touch. If you ever contact me, or if you ever return to the United States, Gabriel won't be the one who comes for you. I will. She walked out, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind her, severing the last tie to her old life. She jogged back toward the main atrium, just as the firefight reached its bloody climax. Flashbangs illuminated the dark halls in blinding bursts of white light. The acrid smell of cordite and copper filled the air. Gabriel's tactical supremacy had utterly crushed Sebastian's desperate assault. Bodies littered the polished linoleum floors. Gabriel stood amidst the carnage, his weapon lowered, unharmed. He saw Simone emerge from the hallway, her expression hollow but resolute. He walked over, stepping over the wreckage, and pulled her tightly against his chest. It's done? He asked quietly, resting his chin on the top of her head. He's gone, Simone whispered, wrapping her arms around his waist, burying her face in his tactical vest. It's just us now. Just us, Gabriel vowed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Now, let's go cut the head off the snake. Sebastian had retreated to his final stronghold, a sprawling, ultra-modern compound built into the rocky cliffs of Southampton. It was an architectural marvel of glass and black steel, fortified like a military bunker. With his funds frozen and his strike teams decimated at the rehab facility, the old boss was isolated, surrounded only by his most elite, heavily paid personal guard. The storm hit at midnight. A torrential downpour battered the Long Island coast, masking the sound of Gabriel's approach. They didn't bother with stealth this time. This wasn't an assassination. This was a public execution to send a message to every syndicate in the country. 2 heavily armored Land Rover Defenders smashed through the compound's reinforced steel gates. Gabriel's men flooded the grounds, armed with M4 carbines equipped with thermal optics. The firefight was deafening, a chaotic symphony of violence in the pouring rain. Simone remained in the command vehicle with Jasper, monitoring the drone feeds. But as Gabriel's men breached the main foyer, the interior cameras suddenly went dark. The compound's automated lockdown protocols triggered, dropping heavy titanium blast doors over every exit. Gabriel and his strike team were trapped inside the main living area. Jasper, what's happening? Simone demanded, leaning over the console. Sebastian engaged a failsafe. Jasper cursed, his fingers flying across his keyboard. It's a Cisco military-grade firewall. It's localized. They're pumping halon gas into the main living area to suffocate them. Panic, icy and sharp, spiked in Simone's chest. She couldn't lose Gabriel. Not now. Not after everything. There has to be a physical override, Simone said, grabbing a waterproof flashlight and a crowbar from the back of the SUV. Where is the server room? Underneath the pool house, Jasper said, looking at the blueprints. But it's guarded. Simone, you can't go out there. Watch me, she snapped, throwing open the vehicle door and sprinting into the torrential rain. The storm lashed at her face, soaking her to the bone instantly. She kept low, using the manicured hedges for cover, as she moved toward the glass-enclosed pool house. 2 of Sebastian's guards were patrolling the perimeter. Simone didn't hesitate. She drew her weapon, taking a steady breath despite the rain blinding her. She fired twice. Both men dropped instantly. The recoil was familiar now. The hesitation was gone. She kicked in the glass door of the pool house, locating the service hatch, hidden beneath a heavy rug. She pried it open with the crowbar and descended into the dark, humming server room. It was a labyrinth of wires and glowing server racks. She found the main terminal. It was locked with a manual keycard swipe. Jasper, I'm at the terminal. It needs a physical bypass, she yelled over her earpiece. Smash the glass on the main junction box and sever the blue fiber optic cable. Jasper instructed frantically. It will hard reboot the system and lift the blast doors, but it will trigger the self-destruct on the servers. You'll have 10 seconds to get out before the electrical fires start. Simone found the junction box. She swung the crowbar, shattering the thick glass. She grabbed a tactical knife from her belt and sliced through the thick cluster of blue cables. Sparks showered the room. The deafening blare of emergency alarms cut through the sound of the storm. Simone scrambled up the ladder just as the server racks below her began to burst into flames, the chemical fire instantly consuming the small room. Inside the main house, the heavy titanium blast doors groaned and slowly began to rise. Gabriel, coughing from the encroaching gas, didn't wait for them to open fully. He slid beneath the rising door, his men right behind him, bursting into Sebastian's private study. Sebastian was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, a glass of vintage bourbon in his hand, an antique revolver resting on the blotter. He looked old, defeated, and entirely devoid of the arrogance he had displayed at the museum. Gabriel leveled his weapon at the older man's chest. "You burned my empire to the ground, Gabriel," Sebastian said quietly, taking a sip of his drink over a waitress. "She was never just a waitress," Gabriel corrected, his voice a low, lethal rumble. "And you made the mistake of thinking I was playing a game." The study door flew open. Simone stood there, soaking wet, breathing heavily, the crowbar still gripped in her hand. She looked from Gabriel to Sebastian. Gabriel lowered his gun slightly. Looking at Simone, he stepped aside, offering her the floor. It was the ultimate gesture of respect. He was giving her the right to end the war she had helped win. Simone walked slowly to the desk. She looked down at the man who had ordered her death, who had manipulated her brother, and who had tried to destroy the only man she had ever loved. "You underestimated us," Simone said, her voice steady and chillingly calm. She reached out, picked up the antique revolver from the desk, and smoothly checked the cylinder. Sebastian's eyes widened in genuine terror. "Wait," Simone leveled the gun at him. "Pull a stunt like this again, and I'll end you. Remember?" She didn't wait for an answer. She pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the compound, signaling the definitive end of the old regime. Simone dropped the revolver onto the desk. She turned and walked directly into Gabriel's waiting arms. He crushed her against him, burying his face in her wet hair, his heavy sighs mingling with hers. They stood amidst the ruins of a fallen empire, the undisputed king and his newly crowned queen. The debt was paid, the blood was spilled, and the streets of New York belonged to them. Months later, the Obsidian Lounge was under new ownership. The waitresses were paid triple, the managers were terrified of crossing the staff, and VIP Table 4 was permanently reserved. Every Friday night, Gabriel Mercer and Simone Jefferson sat at that table, drinking expensive scotch, ruling their city not from the shadows, but from the absolute pinnacle of power. Did you see that ending coming? From a shattered crystal glass in a seedy lounge to taking down a billionaire crime syndicate, Simone proved that true power isn't about the money you're born with. It's about the fire in your soul. She didn't just survive the Mafia. She conquered it and claimed the boss as her own. If this high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled story of betrayal, romance, and absolute revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who loves a fiercely independent heroine who refuses to back down. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our thrilling true-life stories. What would you have done in Simone's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.